Hello everyone, and thank you for the invitation to present and allowing me to do it remotely via video. In this talk I'll be telling you about the online revolution that's been ongoing for the last 20 months or so and how we hope it can provide a high quality education for everyone around the world for free. This revolution started in September of 2011 when Stanford University, based on work that we've been doing for a number of years, took 3 courses in computer science and put them out for everyone around the world to take for free. We were expecting an enrollment of a few thousand students, but within a matter of weeks, each of those courses had an enrollment of 100,000 students or more. That really was a moment in history for us because we realized that we had a tremendous opportunity to take an educational experience that had been available only to a tiny handful of privileged students and provide it to anyone, anywhere, anytime. So in January of 2012, we spun this out of Stanford and created Coursera, which works with multiple top universities to provide an education to everyone from the best universities and the best professors. Now, about 20 months later, we have close to 5 million students from every single country around the world. These students are taking over 450 courses from our 88 university partners. So let's talk a little bit about each of those numbers. This is the set of universities that are working with us. On the left, you see some of the U.S. best universities. Stanford, Michigan, Penn, and Princeton are our first 4 founding partners, but we also have institutions like Duke and Caltech and the University of Washington and the University of Illinois and Columbia and Yale and many others. On the right, you see the non-U.S. institutions that are working with us, and we have some of the best universities around the world in Europe, in Australia, in Latin America, in Asia. Places like Peking University, National University of Singapore, Melbourne, EPF Lausanne, University of Geneva, and many others. Overall, we have 35 of the top 60 universities worldwide, including the top-ranked universities in 15 different countries. The courses started out in computer science, but that's not where we ended up. We now have courses across the range of disciplines. We have courses in humanities, in sciences, in engineering, in business. And in fact, we have a lot of business courses, including most notably an entire first-year MBA curriculum from the Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania that just came online this fall, which we think is an amazing resource for people anywhere who want to become entrepreneurs, for example. Now let's talk a little bit about the students, and I could tell student stories for hours because we get dozens each week, but I'm just going to highlight a few of them. This is Amanda from Dominica, who says that Coursera makes studying easier for me. I could sit at home and learn like I'm at school, no distractions, just me, my headphones, and my books. Everything is clear, the video lectures are just amazing. I could earn certificates and do quizzes to improve my learning without spending a dime to get to my local school. It helps me a lot since my mom is in the hospital and financially I cannot afford to attend school. This is Jose from the Philippines, who took the class on experimental genome science. He admits that the course was very, very challenging. I had to do some of the coursework during lunch at work. I got into an interview for a job I really desired, and I mentioned that I was taking the experimental genome science course. Now I have a new job, evaluating genomic research proposals. Funny how that works. Paola from Greece, not a developing country, but one that's had serious economic difficulties, especially for both unemployed youth as well as a large number of unemployed older people who lost their jobs. She says the Coursera initiative made a 360-degree impact not only on my professional life, but also on my social, cognitive, metacognitive, and emotional development. I can get the most authoritative and best delivered cognitive and strategic tools to start my own business, despite my age. Coursera is a true global democratic experiment, true example of how to realize the principle of equal. So now let's talk a little bit about the user experience in these courses. We tried to make this feel like a real campus class, and so this is not just a bunch of static courseware. The course begins on a given day. Each week there's material the students are responsible for learning and homework that they're responsible for doing. And the homework is graded, and if the students don't do well in the homework, they don't pass the class. And you can see the impact of that model by looking at the usage graph that we see here, where the x-axis is time and the y-axis is load on the site. And you see that heartbeat pattern. That heartbeat pattern is every week, the day before the deadline, everyone logs in to do their homework. Just like in our on-campus classes. And then at the end, there is a certificate that the students get. that we heard about from Amanda. And these certificates are a way for them to gain recognition for the work that they did and keeps them motivated to pass the course. Now let's talk a little bit about each of the components of these courses. The first is the videos themselves. And the videos are designed to be not passive, but rather something that involves an active interaction from the students. So let's see what that looks like.
These four things: prospect theory, hyperbolic discounting, status quo bias, base rate bias, they're all well documented. So they're all well documented deviations from rational behavior.
So the video hits the yellow notch, it pauses, and the students get asked a question. The students answer the question, are given immediate feedback as to whether they're right or wrong, and have the opportunity to try again. Now this is the kind of experience that we might try and do in class by asking questions in our large lecture halls. But when we do that, typically 80% of the students are still scribbling the last thing we said. And then there's that one student sitting in the front row, always the same one, who answers the question before pretty much anyone else has had a chance to realize that a question had been asked. Here, every student engages with the material. But that's not where the meaningful learning happens. That happens in the weekly homeworks. And that, of course, begs the question of how do you grade the work of 100,000 students without having 5,000 teaching assistants? So we use a lot of computer-based grading, which it turns out you can do a lot with. Here, for example, is a really creative example from one of our instructors, Professor Mike Schatz from Georgia Tech, who actually constructed a Physics 1 class with a lab. And of course, these public students don't have access to a lab. So what Professor Schatz did is he had them do the experiments using materials found in their own environment. And then he graded them by having them shoot a video of the experiment, doing a whole bunch of image processing calculations, and compared those to the student measurements so that he could check whether they were doing the work correctly. So you can do a fair bit with auto-grading. We also can do things that you cannot do right now with the computer-based grading, which is things like experiential learning, design projects, essays, art projects, or music projects. So this uses a technique called peer grading, where the students critically assess each other's work using a set of criteria that are provided by the instructor. And it turns out that by doing so, students can really do work in these large open courses that you would not think can be done at this scale, as for example in this design course from the Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania. The final component of the student experience is that of community. Another thing that simply does not scale is the model where an instructor has to answer questions from hundreds of thousands of students, or even hundreds of students is hard to do. And so what we've done here is moved away from the hub and spoke model of interaction to a peer-to-peer model. So students ask questions and other students answer those questions. And in many cases, they answer them better and in greater detail than an instructor would have time to do. We also have, in addition to the virtual community, we have physical communities that have formed around these materials, where students meet once a week in hundreds and hundreds of cities around the world to work together on this challenging material. One such community that I would like to highlight is this community from Ohio that consists of some people who are not among life's most fortunate. This is a group of women, mostly in their 40s and 50s. Only one has a college education. All of them are either unemployed or working in low-paying jobs. They got together, picked a class to take. They took an entrepreneurship class from the Darden Business School at the University of Virginia, took it together, and the amazing thing is that of these 10 people who started the class, 9 of them completed it, and 6 of them passed an MBA level final exam, demonstrating the benefit of this combination of high-quality online content with a physical community that helps people stay retained and engaged. The final piece of the student experience at the end is that of the credential that they get. And for that, we've put in place a program called the Verified Credential, where students can authenticate their identity using a picture ID and also create a biometric profile, which in our case uses keystrokes, because it turns out the keystroke patterns are very distinctive. And that allows us to identify the student every time they log onto the platform and confirm that they're participating in their own work, and provide them with, if they complete the course successfully, with a verified certificate that they can then take to an employer to get maybe a better job. This verified certificate program is also a way for us to become sustainable as a business, despite having the content be freely accessible to everyone. It's an optional program, but one that students pay for, and if they choose to pay for it, it brings back revenue to support the effort. Let's talk finally about some of the implications of this effort. The first is that it allows us to provide an amazing insight into human learning because we have an amazing amount of data that we collect about every individual student, and we collect that about hundreds of thousands of students. And so you can really start to get insight into what's working and what's not. Here, for example, is a distribution of wrong student answers in one of the assignments in our courses. Each little cross is a one-off wrong answer. But for example, the big cross at the top left is where 2,000 students made the exact same mistake. When 2,000 students make the same mistake, it kind of jumps out at you. And so the TAs went in, understood what the issues were with that particular misconception, and now every student whose answer falls into that bucket gets not just a generic wrong answer response, but rather targeted feedback that help them arrive at a right answer faster. Which brings us to one of the other great opportunities that we have in this effort, which is a solution to a 30-year-old problem posed by renowned educational researcher Benjamin Bloom. In this paper called the 2 Sigma Problem, Bloom studied the distribution of achievement scores in 3 populations: a standard lecture-based population, a lecture but in a mastery learning format where students are not allowed to move to the second topic before demonstrating competency in the first, and finally students who are provided an individual human tutor. And you can see that each of these provides a full standard deviation or sigma improvement in performance over the previous one, which would be an amazing thing if we could do in terms of providing a much higher quality education to our students. But hence the title of Bloom's paper, the 2 Sigma Problem, because as a society we cannot afford to provide a tutor to every student. But maybe we can afford to provide them with a tablet. And if we can do that, maybe we can work our way from the blue curve to the red curve, and maybe ultimately to the green curve. The nice thing is that the red curve, mastery learning, is well within reach. Computers genuinely don't mind showing you the same video 5 times. They don't mind grading the same work again and again either. The green curve, individual tutoring, is a little harder to achieve, but we hope that with the use of big data, as I demonstrated on the previous slide, we might eventually be able to get to more personalized feedback that we can give to students. Finally, the other place where we can really improve student outcomes is in the context of our own college classes. So here is a quote that is one of my favorites. It says that college is a place where professors' lecture notes go straight to the students' lecture notes, without passing through the brains of either. Maybe not the most flattering view of a college education, but when you look at this image, not entirely unwarranted perhaps. And so what we propose instead is that we provide students with the best of both worlds. We give them really amazing online content that they can study at their own time, at their own pace, achieving mastery. And then they come into class and don't just sit there passively listening to someone drone on at them, but rather have the opportunity to really engage in a dialogue with the instructor as well as with other students and really practice the kind of skills that they're supposed to be learning in these classes. So in fact, one of our instructors from Wharton Business School, Christian Turwish, taught an operations management class on Coursera, and one of his final lecture was a case study of these MOOCs. Christian argues that that teaching is by definition a trade-off along a Pareto optimal curve between faculty productivity, the number of students that an instructor can teach, say, in an hour, and student learning outcomes. The black dot, the large lecture hall, has pretty good productivity. You can teach a few hundred students at once, but the learning outcomes are so-so. Office hours, individualized attention, have great learning outcomes, but faculty productivity is very low. Christian argues that MOOCs provide us with new Pareto optimal frontier that we can use in different ways. You can make the same quality of instruction as in a large lecture hall and provide that to hundreds of thousands of students at the same cost, thereby considerably decreasing the cost per student. But at the same time, you can also take the same amount of effort that a faculty has in a large lecture hall and instead use that to improve learning outcomes to students by moving to this active learning in the classroom instead. So you can use this new Pareto optimal curve in different ways for different student populations. So I'd like to just end this talk with a final slide that reminds us all why we're doing this. Currently, a third of our students are in the United States. Only a little less than 30% are in Europe. 40% are in what is defined to be the developing world. In many of these countries in the developing world, students will not have access in their lifetime to any kind of high quality education because the educational capacity just isn't there. There are not enough academic institutions. There are not enough qualified instructors. If we want to give these people access to education within a reasonable time frame, we need a different type of solution. So we hope that the use of this scalable technology that can provide an amazing education to people will help us take education and turn it from a privilege of the few to a basic human right. Thank you very much.